Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I will be reacting to my amazing AFCON predictions. Obviously not so. There is no way anyone perfected their predictions here. Unless you base some of your upsets on exactly what happened in the last AFCON as well. I said it at the beginning though, this is the toughest international tournament to make certain calls for. Today I'm repping Ethiopia even though they didn't qualify for this AFCON. But even if they did, they probably could have done better than some of the favorites. I knew this would age terribly. Way too many groups have flipped around unexpectedly. So let's recap on what I said and what happened overall in the group stage. Please drop an early like, subscribe if you're new, and if you want to see my round of 16 predictions, I created a short for that. I'll leave a link in the description below. But yeah, without any further ado, let's start off with Group A. Already a very difficult group with Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, and Guinea-Bissau. Many eyes are on Nigeria for their brilliant attack force at the moment. So many informed players. They are set in this department for sure, but their midfield and especially their defense are looking worrisome. They've only kept 2 clean sheets in all of 2023 against Saint Tome and Principe and Guinea-Bissau, who are also of course in this group, and they have both beaten each other head-to-head twice back in March. A lot of expectations are there for the Super Eagles of course, but with this sort of squad imbalances in certain positions, I think that they could be left disappointed. It's going to be tough coming up against the host Ivory Coast without a doubt. They can be unpredictable themselves, but unlike Nigeria, they do have some solid defenders. There are many quality center backs on this team. The youngster from Sporting, Diomande, is one of the most valuable young players in Africa at the moment. Cosono on Bayer Leverkusen, Indica on Roma, Singo on Monaco. Along with their midfield, Fofana and Kessia have gone to Saudi Arabia, but we know what they're about. And their attack, they've got Haller. He's injured with an unknown return date at the time of this recording, but they still have other players that they can rely on up top. I would be shocked if Ivory Coast cannot have a deep run in this tournament, obviously depending on who they get on this bracket, and I'm saying that they get first in this group. Now Nigeria should be getting second place, but we cannot underestimate the other 2 teams in this group. Equatorial Guinea had a great run in the last tournament, beating Algeria in the group stage and defeating Mali on penalties in the round of 16. They haven't lost a single match in 2023, even facing Burkina Faso and Tunisia, and some of their matches were kept very low scoring. Sure, they do not have the big name players on paper like Nigeria do, but based on them being able to frustrate so many other teams in 2023, I would not be surprised if they can grab a point or even 3 against Nigeria. This group definitely looks predictable on the surface, but if we're going to go for any upsets here in this video, this is one where I do see something pulling through. This will probably age terribly, but looking at how the last AFCON went, there will probably be even more upsets than I predict in this video. I'm going for Equatorial Guinea 2nd, Nigeria 3rd, and Guinea-Bissau 4th. That being said though, I still have Nigeria advancing to the round of 16. So the only thing I got correct in this was Guinea-Bissau 4th, but I will give myself some credit for believing in Equatorial Guinea. Most people obviously expected Nigeria and Ivory Coast to get 1st and 2nd, but that was far from happening. As you saw, I was expecting Nigeria to be the ones to slip, but it was the hosts instead. A loss to Nigeria head-to-head wasn't surprising, but on the final group stage match for them, they lost to Equatorial Guinea 4-0. How the hell can the hosts crumble that hard? I predicted this side to make it all the way to the final in my bracket. Yeah, there's obviously no way that's going to happen if they keep performing like this. They still qualified for the round of 16, but just barely, being one of the best of the worst 3rd place teams to advance. Poor Drogba, man. With Chelsea and Ivory Coast performances lately, if he wasn't bald already, he definitely would be this year. And I was praising each player individually so well. I don't know what the hell happened here, but this has to be one of the most disappointing results in the nation's history, especially playing at your own home ground. Definitely questionable times for them, as after that 4-0 humiliation, their manager Gasseth resigned. Although Nigeria did prove me wrong, I'm still slightly disappointed in one of the best players in this tournament, Victor Osimhen. He only scored 1 goal so far against Equatorial Guinea, and that match finished in a draw. Nigeria can never score more than 1 goal in any match, and with their amazing attack, that's a bit surprising. And it's also surprising that Equatorial Guinea, who are in the same group as them, were able to score 4 goals back-to-back. They scored a total of 9 goals in the group stage, while Nigeria scored 3. Emiliano Nu has been one of the best attackers in the tournament. A 34-year-old playing in the 3rd tier of Spain has already scored 5 goals in the group stage, a hat-trick against Guinea-Bissau and 2 against the Ivory Coast. This guy used to primarily play as a right back as well, and still sometimes does for his club. It really blows my mind that he's able to outscore Victor Osimhen, who is the most valuable player in this tournament. But big shout out to Equatorial Guinea. They are now 13 matches unbeaten. Their last loss was all the way back in September 2022, months before the World Cup even began. This was a tough group, and they're scoring more goals than any other country. And yeah, I'm sorry to the Super Eagles for for putting you guys down. Like you see in this tournament, there were so many upsets, and my prediction was that Nigeria would be the one to disappoint. I'm sure most of you did not predict this group correct, but maybe some of you did, so let me know if that's the case, but it actually gets even crazier after that. Let's move on to Group B. Group B now with Egypt, Ghana, Cape Verde, and Mozambique. Upsets for sure possible, but I think this group might be easier to call than Group A. I'm having Mozambique finish 4th place. This is their first AFCON since 2010, only participating in 4 tournaments since its creation, and every single time they've been in it, they have been knocked out in the group stage. 4th place seems like the safest pick for them, but we'll see. Cape Verde, within many of our lifetimes, have been looking like a solid team in Africa. A squad that might be transitioning a bit, but they could still rely on their veteran players. 2023 was not the most brilliant year for them, where we saw them suffer some heavy losses, but also had some interesting wins like beating Burkina Faso and even drawing Morocco. I think this side still definitely has the quality to get 3rd in this group, but unfortunately, they are one of the unlucky ones to not advance to the knockouts. Now for the top 2, Egypt or Ghana. Ghana desperately need to do well in this group, as they were such a disappointment in the last tournament. Over the past 2 years or so, they have been recruiting a lot of new players. However, tactically, as a national team, they do not look so sound. Recently, they have suffered heavy losses to the USA, Mexico, and even Comoros in the World Cup qualifiers. Comoros also upset them in the last AFCON, one of the teams to defeat them, suffering their ultimate 4th place crumble. Their Irish manager Houghton, I think, has a lot to figure out to make sure Ghana do not slip again in a group like this, but I think they'll be able to fight for 2nd, even if that means barely. Meaning I do have Egypt as my favorites to top the group. Okay, maybe you got the overall standings correct, but there is no chance you got the chain of events correct. Cape Verde topping the group, claiming that top spot after matchday 2, was definitely uncalled for. Another surprising fact about this group is that Cape Verde were the only country to grab a win. Egypt, who even finished in 2nd place, failed to grab a single win, and also failed to grab a single loss. They drew every single match. But the last thing that I'm positive you failed to predict on was that Egypt would draw every single one of their matches with a 2-2 scoreline. And Ghana and Mozambique shared the same exact record, Ghana just taking 3rd, but definitely being amongst one of those worst 3rd place teams. So they will not be qualifying for the next round. Before we bash on Ghana, let's go over each of these teams one by one in order. Shout out to Cape Verde. A country with a population of 600,000 people were able to top 2 what were supposed to be African giants. It started with that 2-1 victory against Ghana with a stoppage time winner, and then defeating Mozambique 3-0, which might not seem so impressive because you might be underplaying Mozambique, but we gotta keep in mind, they are the only team in this group to defeat Mozambique. And we cannot forget about Bebe Screamer, a 40-yard free kick scored. A player who has disappeared a bit from the scene, he's still playing in La Liga, just definitely somewhat forgotten, is still proving his worth for the national team. And then in that final match against Egypt, 2 stoppage time goals from each country. 93rd minute and 99th minute goal. Just like Equatorial Guinea, big shout out to this nation. I always knew that they were underrated in the football scene, even given their population, but I just did not think that they would be able to top Ghana and Egypt this time around. Egypt, we have to give some benefit of the doubt. They did have Salah get injured against Ghana, so he was only able to play a full set of 90 minutes against Mozambique. But yeah, even with him gone, the side still fought hard. They didn't look organized at times. I mean, Ghana definitely should have been able to beat them, to be honest. Egypt's first goal was very easily given up from Ghana, and their second was simply poor defense. My biggest fear was their manager, Chris Houghton, as Ghana really are a solid side that have been developing, bringing a lot of new players in, but under his tactics, they could not flourish. The only one to really step up his game was obviously Kudus. But the way Ghana went out of this tournament is absolutely humiliating. They had a 2-0 lead from 2 Jordan Ayew penalties, and then conceded 2 stoppage time goals to Mozambique. First, a penalty in the 91st minute, okay, but then in the 93rd, Ghana's goalkeeper decided to touch the ball when it was easily going out for a goal kick. And what did Mozambique do? You guessed it, scored from the corner. If the goalkeeper decided to just let that ball go and not touch it, they would be second place over Egypt. So you know what, although Chris Houghton's tactics were not necessarily that great, I can't fully blame him. I take that back. That catastrophic mistake from Afori definitely deserves some blame as well. And I gotta say, although Gamba really fumbled the bag there, big shout out to Mozambique for proving to have a very solid fight against 2 African giants. It seemed easy to bank on this side crumbling, but they very much kept things exciting and stirred up this group massively. Yeah, Project Ghana overall just seems to be quite the failure though. They failed to make it out of the World Cup group stage. They also got knocked out of the Africa Cup of Nations 2 tournaments in a row. They aren't the only team to suffer that failure that has higher expectations, obviously. We'll get into Algeria later. But this is an absolute embarrassment considering that expectations were much higher once they brought in a lot of those new players. 2 tournaments in a row suffering like this is just simply unacceptable. Group C, another where I think we could see another upset or so. There's Senegal, Cameroon, Guinea, and the Gambia. Senegal, being the last AFCON champions with a fantastic team on paper, will be tough for sure. Many of their best players have gone to the Saudi League, and maybe they are not at their prime anymore. But there's no denying how fantastic of a team they are. Maybe we could see them less motivated since they already won the last tournament, but I think that they will want to cement their legacy with this incredible generation of players that they do possess right now. And Cameroon also remain a top team in Africa. Yes, Onana has not been brilliant this year, but sometimes players are only cursed while wearing a United shirt, you know. They still have Anguissa, Abubakar, who has dropped form a bit, but still has had so many big moments in a Cameroon shirt, like scoring against Brazil in the World Cup. I said in my early predictions that I think Senegal will fall short to third, but I'm going to go against that thought now. I'm not going to go for any upsets in this group. Senegal first, Cameroon second, Guinea third, advancing to the knockouts, and Gambia fourth. Alright, so for the first 2 groups, I only got 4th place correct. In Group C, I did end up getting it 100% correct, but I easily could not have. This group really went down to the wire. Cameroon, despite finishing second at the end, were quite disappointing. In their final match against the Gambia, they were 2-1 down in the 85th minute. But thanks to an own goal in the 87th and a 91st minute corner scored by Christopher Wu, Cameroon made a comeback and won 3-2. If they got anything less than a win in that match, they would have not qualified for the knockouts. They finished second, tied with Guinea on points, only because they scored more goals than them. And I was correct about Guinea being one of the 3rd place teams to qualify for the next round. Surprisingly though, Guinea only scored 2 goals in the group stage, and their best player, Guirassy, failed to score any. But I guess it doesn't matter, they still did the job at the end, and they were in a difficult group. Despite Cameroon being slightly disappointing, they definitely are one of the better teams on paper in the Africa Cup of Nations, and Senegal are the previous champions. Shout out to Senegal for absolutely cruising through this group. They scored a total of 8 goals and only conceded 1 to Cameroon. They have one of the best managers in the business as well. Their trust in Aliou Cisse is amazing, and yeah, they're the only team in this tournament to grab 3-for-3 wins. Every other team at least picked up a draw along the way, even if they went undefeated. And the Gambia, I gotta say, very good fight. This side is ranked by FIFA as the worst nation in this tournament, although they did make it to the quarterfinals in the last Africa Cup of Nations. This time they were put in an unfortunate group. Yeah, not too much to say here because this is the only group so far that went expected for many, but that's about to change very quickly. Let's move on to Group D. Group D now with Algeria, Burkina Faso, Mauritania, and Angola. Algeria were so disappointing last time, like I mentioned. After some incredible unbeaten streak they possessed, they finished 4th in their group somehow. Also, while being the previous champions to that tournament in 2019. They need to pick it back up, and I definitely think they can. I'd say that they are one of the sides that are in the equation to win the entire thing. Definitely somewhat of a forgotten nation compared to the other African teams since they failed to qualify for the last World Cup, and were also so disappointing in the last Africa Cup of Nations. But for that World Cup spot, we have to remember that it was really down to the wire against Cameroon there. This side have one of the best teams in the tournament. Benaker, Ait Nouri, Mahrez, many more, I know. Despite their shortcomings in recent times, they have stuck with their same manager since 2018, Belmadi. And with not losing a game in 2023, although that might not mean much, cycling back to the last tournament, I do see Algeria topping the group this year. Cannot sleep on Burkina Faso though. I think that they are also slightly an underappreciated side recently, as they have never qualified for the World Cup and still made it to the AFCON semifinals last time. They also have some quality on their side that have been improving over time. I have them getting 2nd place. That battle for 3rd and 4th, I'm sorry to say whoever gets 3rd place in this group, I do not see them advancing to the knockouts. Right now I think Angola are the favorites to clinch that spot though, since they have a little bit more experience, and Mauritania do seem to struggle away from home. Who knows though, Angola are going to be missing some key players in this tournament, including Helder Costa and Nzola. Unless you're from Angola and you love your country, there is no way you predicted this group correct. The falloff from Algeria is insane. After being AFCON champions in 2019, they are now 6 AFCON matches winless, finishing last place in obviously a group you shouldn't underestimate, but a group that 100% should have been doable for them given their quality. Even after failing to grab a win against Angola and Burkina Faso, people still believed that they would progress at the end. Clearly I was wrong. They should have sacked Belmadi earlier. Sure, he won them AFCON 2019, and sure, he came close to qualifying for the World Cup 2022, but he has been continuously failing the national team over and over again. 2 AFCONs in a row then he wins, failing to qualify for the World Cup. I guess the signs were there earlier. When you break down that final matchup against Mauritania versus Algeria, obviously Algeria by far should be getting the win. Much better squad on paper, but it seems like it all broke down to the coaching, as Mauritania's manager, Amir Obdo, was the Comoros manager in the last AFCON. Mauritania actually played pretty well in the other AFCON fixtures. I think they just got a bit unlucky with clinical finishing and all that. But this time against Algeria, it paid off. They could have even scored more goals, to be fair, on the counter. This side's third place finish grants them a spot in the knockouts. I thought this would for sure be a group where Algeria and Burkina Faso would outclass these two teams. But no. I mean, to be fair to Algeria, they did better than the last AFCON. Last time they only grabbed 1 point. This time they grabbed 2. But still, an absolute embarrassment. I mean, the funny thing is about the Algerian manager is, although he's been with the national team for so long, he still does not seem to know what his best 11 is. A lot needs changing for Algeria. They can't look at the past anymore, like they did with the 2019 AFCON. It's just time to move forward. This has to be one of the worst performances in the Africa Cup of Nations. I can't decide which group stage exit is worse, Ghana or Algeria. And you can also make the comparison for the last AFCON. You know what, I maybe would say Algeria's is worse because although full credit to Mauritania and Angola and even Burkina Faso, I would argue that this group is less difficult than Ghana's. But moving on to Angola, it's really impressive that they were able to clinch first place. Before this AFCON, there were way too many 0-0 scorelines going for Angola. And then once the AFCON began, they scored in every single match at least once. 1 against Algeria, 3 against Mauritania in a thriller of a match. I think that's when we also realized you can't underestimate Mauritania. They scored 2 there. I mean, from those 0-0 results, it just seems so easy to not bank on this side. Maybe pull their way through for some draws and clinch third place to advance to the knockouts. But first, with 6 goals scored, I would have never saw that coming. Now, not only did I get Angola's standings incorrect, obviously, I also banked on them to not advance to the next round, even if they clinched third. But this is a group where we saw 3 teams advance to the knockouts. Angola topped the group, Mauritania advanced, Algeria left disappointed. I don't know. This group definitely shocked me the most. Group E now with Mali, Tunisia, South Africa, and Namibia. Mali are an interesting talking point though, as they have been on the rise. They have a lot of young talent that could be shining, and some matches they come out scoring loads of goals. Probably one of the more exciting rises in African football right now. This nation does seem hopeful that one day soon that they can qualify for their first ever World Cup, but for this tournament in particular, I definitely see them advancing to the knockouts. The main reason why Tunisia fell short in that last AFCON though is because of their COVID outbreak throughout the group stage. Although they fell short in the World Cup group stage as well, they did have some remarkable moments, including drawing to Denmark, defeating France, only falling short to Australia. They sometimes play a bit too defensively, but hey, it works for them. They have such an underrated side on their belt, and each player individually works wonderfully for their system on their day. Tunisia should be getting first for me, barely beating Mali, so I'm putting Mali at second. But who knows, maybe we could see the likes of South Africa pulling something through here. I mean, they have defeated Morocco in 2023, which shocked many. They even were able to defeat the likes of DR Congo and drew to the Ivory Coast. However, one of their last matches they did lose to Rwanda, which is not a good look at all. They might not make it easy for the 2 teams I'm definitely going for to advance. I could see them drawing to one of them or potentially grabbing a narrow win. With almost half of their squad playing for the Mamelodi Sundowns, they definitely could be familiar with one another. However, that fact also leaves others critical, as their manager Hugo Broos failed to select some of their better players who play abroad. This could harm South Africa's success, but I'm saying that they finished third, putting off good fights against Tunisia and Mali, and also advancing to the knockouts. And yeah, I am putting Namibia at 4th. This side faced South Africa twice this year, both resulting in a draw. Maybe we'll see a third one, definitely possible, but I don't see it happening this time around. Regardless, it will definitely be an interesting fixture. I just see them struggling in this group overall. Well, I got none of my placements correct. I got the correct order of Mali, South Africa, Namibia, but Tunisia ruined every single one of those placements, being an absolute embarrassment in this tournament, failing to grab a win as well. It all started with that loss to Namibia at the beginning, and that's when we knew that this side were in trouble, as that was Namibia's first win in AFCON history. So again, something I assure you that most people did not predict, as Tunisia have a lot more history in football than Namibia. But to emphasize, it's also the reason why this tournament is so beautiful, man. Tunisia were only able to score 1 goal against Mali, which also finished in a draw, and then on the final match day, they drew 0-0 to South Africa. They could have redeemed themselves on that final match day, but they failed to do so. And I gotta say, big up to South Africa. They suffered that loss to Mali in the beginning, but it was only motivation for them to come back. They beat their neighbors Namibia 4-0 the next time around, and then held off for a draw against Tunisia, who were very much looking for their first win. But also big up to Namibia. They finished 3rd place, but they will be advancing to the knockouts. It's amazing how their first win in AFCON history ended up translating them to qualifying for the knockouts for the first time as well. Mali, the only team to go undefeated, but their only win was against South Africa. It doesn't surprise me that they were the ones to top the group. This is a very young, energetic squad that I think will only improve in the future, but I am surprised that Tunisia slipped so low. I mean, seriously, I know they didn't qualify for the knockouts in the World Cup, but how do you go from beating France? I know they weren't playing their best players, but still, how do you go from beating France to now falling into 4th place in the Africa Cup of Nations to a side that's never won a match in the tournament? I know I was getting South Africa some criticism for not selecting certain players in their roster, but it seems to end up paying off. I mean, they had one of the most one-sided scorelines in this tournament so far against Namibia, where we saw one of their strikers, Zwane, score a brace. I probably already made this clear, but still, I just gotta emphasize again, although this video's not over, I'm honestly very happy that I got a lot of these predictions wrong. It's truly the beauty of the tournament. Group F now with Morocco, DR Congo, Zambia, and Tanzania. Morocco should be the favorites to top this group, given their squad, given their recent success being the best World Cup team out of any African nation. Some players you can argue have slowed down within that year alone, but regardless, they still remain the favorites on paper in this group. They have one of the better midfields in the competition, which I think has them just standing out against many of the other top teams. Another quote-unquote easy pick, I'm sorry to say, I think Tanzania will finish 4th. They have never won a single AFCON game in their history. Despite putting off some interesting results this year, like drawing to Algeria, I do not see this fact changing. Best of luck, though, to this nation. Between DR Congo and Zambia, though, it's tough to say. Zambia told probably the most incredible AFCON story back in 2012. And now in 2024, they have some very exciting attacking options. On their day, they have shown that they can score many goals in a match, but are also prone to leaking quite a few. DR Congo overall on paper look to be a bit more complete in certain positions, and they look a lot more organized defensively. I think the safest pick is to put DR Congo at 2nd and Zambia 3rd, but I would not be surprised if I'm wrong whatsoever. Zambia are a great team, of course, and I think their fights will be tremendous enough for them to be one of the 3rd place teams to advance to the knockouts. Alright, thankfully, I did get another group completely correct. I desperately needed that. The only thing I was wrong about my prediction, though, was Zambia advancing as one of the 3rd place teams. They are amongst the worst, failing to grab a single win. Similar outcome to Ghana, basically. But also something I was very wrong about in this prediction was I thought Zambia would be scoring a lot more goals. No matter what happened in the result, I thought that they would be leaking a lot and scoring a lot. Well, both were not really to be the case. They did concede 1 in every single match, and they only scored 2 goals, as their first 2 results finished in a 1-1 draw. Against Morocco, all they had to do was score again, and they would have been through. It was looking a bit more unlikely, as Morocco are a much more solid team. They were the favorites in this group, and favorites for many in this competition. Despite not grabbing 3 for 3 wins, they still balled out, had a bit of a brawl with DR Congo there on the 2nd match day, and DR Congo, just like Egypt, went undefeated but also didn't grab a single win. They drew every single match. Tanzania could not write that underdog story like some other nations did. Despite conceding loads to Morocco in their first match, they did put off good fights in their other 2 fixtures. I gotta say, despite Morocco not being so electric in their second 2 matches compared to facing Tanzania, I still have them as my favorites to go and win the whole thing. They haven't really had any major slips yet, and obviously the dressing room charisma and all that are still at an all-time high after doing so well in the World Cup. But yeah, here's the official round of 16 bracket. I'm only making a short for my round of 16 predictions because I do have a lot to go over for the Asian Cup as well. I want to release my reactions for this tournament along with the Asian Cup. So unfortunately, this round of prediction videos, I cannot make a long video out of them for either tournament. But I'll do my best to make one for the quarterfinals, semifinals, and final and all that. For now, though, we'll stick to the shorts. So I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Thank you all for making it to the end. 2 out of 6 groups correct. For AFCON, I'll take that. Make sure you subscribe to tune into my Asian Cup reactions as well, which I'll be posting very soon. And I will see you all then. Take care. Boa noite.